Are we going? I think we are. Well, here we go again. Behringer have done it. They've finally gone and they've re-released, they've cloned, whatever you want to call it, but they've brought out their own version of Mutable Instruments Clouds. It is Behringer Skies. Skies, strange name. Behringer Sky. Why didn't they call it Sky? Skies? Are there multiple skies? I suppose there can be multiple skies. Yeah, so Behringer Skies. What do we think about that then? If you are not familiar with the module Clouds by Mutable Instruments, where have you been for the last so many years? It's probably one of the most popular and well-known modules in the Eurorack world. It is, yeah. What to say about Clouds? Well, we all hopefully know what Clouds is. It is based on granular synthesis. It has a lovely reverb. There are multiple different firmwares. It's a wonderful module. Behringer have finally gone ahead and maybe after many requests, I guess, lots of people wanting this module to come out, but they've finally gone ahead and done it. So Mutable Instruments Clouds, it's become quite an iconic module, especially in combination with Rings into Clouds is that very well-known YouTube modular synth cliche thing that is wonderful and we all love it. And obviously it's not going away, because if it was, they wouldn't have just released this module. Hey there, if you are enjoying these videos and you are enjoying the weird and wonderful world of modular synthesis, then please do consider hitting the subscribe button. It just lets the algorithm know that I'm not sat here muttering to myself in this room full of cables for no reason. And of course, if you would like to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon, the link is in the description. There's not an awful lot on there at the moment, but it is growing and it is filling up. You can kind of think of it as like an exclusive minimalist modular experience. But genuinely, your support is very much appreciated. It keeps the patch cables untangled and the ideas flowing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. It really does mean a lot. But let's get back to the video, shall we? Cheerio. So welcome to another video, and today we are talking about Clouds, or as Behringer have redubbed it, Skies. So if you are new to modular synth and you don't know what Mutable Instruments Clouds is, it is a, I think in its own sort of documentation it refers to it as a texture synthesizer, but it's based on granular synthesis. So granular synthesis is where you take sound and you chop it up into tiny little fragments called grains, and then you can stretch those grains and you can manipulate them and you can layer them up on top of each other and so on and so forth. You can make some interesting sounds and textures. But Clouds also, as well as having all of that in there, it has this really wonderful lush reverb that anything that goes through it just sounds fantastic, and it is part of that combo of Rings into Clouds that we all know and love so well. Yeah, Clouds. So there are already so many clones of Clouds out there, and not only just clones of the original Clouds, but also multiple different firmwares for Clouds. I'm not going to attempt to list them all here, but you know that. There's the Parasites in the Supercell firmware. I think there are some others as well. And then there are different versions of the hardware, which have got, some of those versions have got more, what's the word? Controllability, I guess, over some of the features. So there are already quite a lot of different varieties of Clouds in existence. And then, of course, you know, we shouldn't forget VCV, because VCV has clones as well. There are a number of VCV modules which I think are called audible instruments, and there's a version of Clouds in there too. So Clouds it's a very well known module. I almost said pedal then, we're not talking about guitar pedals. So it's a very well known module. It's a very well loved module. It's obviously not going away anywhere soon. I guess what's interesting is that there are quite a few modules of this type that will do granular synthesis really well, and there's been some new ones out recently. So it's interesting to see Behringer releasing their own version of Clouds. What makes this one different? What makes it special? Well, to start off with, it's the price. £90. £90. I'm not sure what that is in dollars or euros if you are from one of those places where that is your currency, but £90 here in the UK for Behringer's Skies. That is ridiculously cheap. I think, you know, most of the clones are probably around £200, maybe more. So it's kind of like less than half what you're going to pay for another, you know, a clone from somebody else. So personally, you know, Clouds is one of my favourite modules. I use it all the time. I can't imagine ever not using Clouds, even though, you know, I'd like to think that I would try and do something different sometimes, but it always ends up being in there. My version of Clouds is actually, it's the jack plug Typhoon, which is sitting right in the middle there. Not doing anything at the moment because there's nothing plugged in, but it has so on the original Clouds you had to cycle through the wet stereo feedback and reverb control. You had one knob to control each of those features, but on this version you've got one knob per thing, so you don't need to cycle through, and then you've got sliders for the position, density, size and texture, input and output level thingies, and then buttons to go through. So you actually get all of the different firmwares on here, and you have little buttons to go through, and you can save versions of that, which is really quite interesting. Up until quite recently though, I did tend to use it just in the normal bog standard mode, and then recently I've been exploring some of the other firmwares a little bit more, and that is quite interesting. But we're not here to talk about Typhoon, we're here to talk about Behringer Skies. And you know, it is interesting to see that they've gone for the you know, the original version of the Mutable Instruments Clouds, which I suppose, you know, they probably would do that because it would be in keeping with everything else that they've released so far, rather than trying to sort of do their own take on it. But yeah, the big talking point is the price of £90, which is just kind of ridiculous, really, to think that it could be so cheap. You know, and we do talk a lot about, or people, you know, one of the criticisms of modular is that it is expensive and it's difficult to get into because it's so expensive. But when you've got a company such as Behringer, which are releasing modules which are not basic, they're not basic modules, you know. Clouds, although it's been around for a long time, it's a very powerful module. Releasing modules of that ilk for £90 is just kind of ridiculous, really. And I really think, you know, it's possible that you might say that I've been a little bit critical of Behringer in the past, and, you know, questioned why they're doing what they're doing. But actually, I think this really goes a long way to help kind of open the door up to modular for, you know, for beginners, maybe even for educational establishments, musicians on a budget, whatever. You know, you can get into modular through Behringer very cheaply, and you know, it's a great way to start. And if you are thinking of getting into modular, I think, you know, if I were wanting to get into modular now, I think that would be the route that I would take. I would be getting some Behringer modules and a small case, you know, maybe a few other bits and bobs, and that would be how I would start building a Eurorack system. You know, and then later on, maybe getting some, you know, swapping some of those out for more expensive modules. You know, when you contrast it with what we see from some of the boutique, is that the right word? But you know, the more kind of, I don't know, smaller manufacturers, which, to be honest, I would always like to think that I would want to support these smaller manufacturers and you know, buy from there. But if you are on a budget and you're not able to do that, then you know, you simply can't, can you? And you know, if you are in a position to be able to afford these more expensive modules, then that's probably the route to go. And you know, there undoubtedly will be benefits from buying from you know, those manufacturers. Maybe the build quality is better. You know, the modules, I think the Behringer modules are definitely not the nicest looking. You know, the face plates aren't that nice aesthetically, whereas if you buy something from one of these more sort of smaller boutique module builders, you're probably going to get a nicer, higher quality piece of kit. Which is not to say that the Behringer is not going to do the job, but you know, corners have to be cut and costs have to be reduced somewhere, and that's probably where it is being cut, because I really, you know, don't know how they can make it for so cheap. And in fact, I think, you know, I have bought some of the Behringer modules, or well, I bought one of them. I think it's called Radar, which is their version of ears. It was £30, £30 compared to £100. I think the Mutable Instruments version was about £100 second hand on eBay. So I bought the Behringer one because it was so ridiculously cheap. I've already got one version, which is the Mutable Instruments one. I wanted another version for a different case, a different project, and I just thought, I'm not sure if this project's going to work, so I'm going to just get this cheap Behringer one. And yeah, I probably will talk about that project at some point in the future in a different video. But anyway, in case it didn't work, I didn't want to, you know, wreck a more expensive module. Having said that, I have recently bought another version of that module, but I haven't bought the Behringer one the second time. I've bought the After Later Audio version of ears, because although that Behringer version was cheap, it was slightly wider HP. It looks awful. It's really, really awful looking module. You know, the design of it, the faceplate and so on. And I just thought, well, in my main case, I don't. Maybe it's a bit snobbish, I don't know, but I didn't want it in there. For one, it was going to take up more space, so I bought the After Later Audio version. That was a little bit more expensive. I think it was about £90. But it just looks a lot nicer sitting there in the case, and I don't know, I feel bad about that, but yeah. So anyway, where I was heading with this before I went off on a massive tangent. So we have a modular system at college where I work to use with the students. It is a Doepfer A100 system. It's the one, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a case and there's 2 rows and you get a whole bunch of modules. You buy it you know, pre-built, and it comes with some patch cables and whatnot, but there's an empty row at the bottom. So we have one of these systems at college. We were going to put in some additional modules in that 3rd row, but at the time there wasn't the budget to buy the extra modules. And I was looking at some of the Mutable Instruments clones, clouds, rings, and whatnot. And I think a maths as well I wanted to put in there. Just, you know, the usual suspects, but we hadn't got the money in the budget to do that, so it never happened. So we just got the basic Doepfer case. We haven't got any of those extra modules. But now with some of these ones that are coming out from Behringer, I think that we will probably be in budget, and you know, for college they are brilliant. That, you know, that cheaper price really means that we can get some of those modules hopefully for the students to play around with. And you know, that will be really good, because it means that those students, you know, they're 16 to 18 years old. They'll get the experience to work with some of these modules where otherwise they wouldn't, and hopefully, you know, it might turn some of them onto Modular Synth. But if it wasn't for Behringer, we probably wouldn't be doing that. At one point, we were in sort of partnership with Behringer, because they had one of their sort of factories not far from the college, but it moved to a different area of the country. So we did have kind of a partnership with Behringer, and we were able to actually sort of loan equipment from them and get some stuff at discount price. But we're not able to do that anymore. But definitely, I think we'll be looking to buy some of these mutable instruments modules, and clouds will be one of them. You know, and I think if you are somebody who is getting into modular synth, this could be a good way to go. You know, and I'd probably, you know, if I were getting into modular again, I'd probably look to getting some, you know, some sort of contained modular voice that's got, you know, oscillator and VCAs and whatever, all in the one module, a single voice, and then, you know, some of these Behringer mutable instruments modules around that as well, and you could actually get a really nice small system set up for not too much money. You know, and when you sort of compare it to, I don't know, if you compare it to sort of getting into guitar, for example, it's still probably a little bit more expensive, but that, you know, £90 for a module, that, you know, I feel that's a similar price to a lot of sort of, you know, inexpensive, mid-range, inexpensive guitar pedals. So, you know, I think it is good to have the option for these cheaper modules out there. You know, and I've kind of said, you know, it's not the most visually pleasing module, but it doesn't really matter. I'm sure it does the job. And, you know, if it sounds good and it works and it does the job, does it really matter that it's a little bit ugly? I don't think it does. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be the original firmware will be on there, and I assume that you can swap different firmwares on there the same way as you could, you know, with the original version. Yeah, you know, and you could argue that is it still relevant? Is cloud still relevant to this day and age? Sorry, is cloud still relevant in this day and age when there are so many clones out there that actually build on the original and, you know, have more features and different firmwares and additional controls and so on? And then also when you look at, you know, some of the newer modules that are out that are taking granular synthesis and you know, doing some amazing things, and probably, you know, a bit more advanced maybe than Clouds is now. Obviously you've got Beads, which is Mutable Instruments' own, the final module that they released before closing, which, you know, in many ways is like an updated version of Clouds. And then you've got Qubits, what's it called, Mojave. IntelliGel have just released, what is it called, Multigrain. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of really great granular synthesis modules out there. So is Clouds still relevant? I guess it must be to a certain extent, because you know, if it weren't, then Behringer wouldn't be releasing it at this time. And maybe, you know, the fact that it is an older module and it's been around for quite a while, maybe that also contributes to the lower price and what people are willing to pay. You know, some of those other modules that I've just mentioned probably are quite a hefty price tag on those. So, you know, being able to sort of get into the world of granular and have that lovely reverb as well from Clouds for just £90 is probably a bit of a bargain. I should say, of course, because I am kind of gushing a little bit over this module, I guess, but I am in no way sponsored or any of that nonsense. You know, I don't even have the module to talk about it. You know, so I'm not getting anything from Behringer for making this video. It's just some thoughts about, you know, seeing the news or seeing the video last night pop up from Behringer where they announced that this module was coming. So, you know, I think summing up, I think it is a positive thing because it lowers the barrier to entry for people into modular, and you know, in the long run, if that helps more people get into modular and it helps the whole modular community sort of grow and so on, then that's a good thing. You know, I think it's good for educational establishments that will have not a huge budget for this sort of thing, which means that students can get their hands on these modules as well. So all in all, I think it is a good thing. It is a positive thing. But let me know, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And yes, I think that's all I've got to say for today. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and all that malarkey. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Cheerio.